I'm a part of a pastor group on Facebook. It's just AG pastors, so all the lead pastors of the AG churches throughout the just around the nation, and they got in quite the argument the other day. It's kind of funny, all these pastors arguing amongst themselves, but they got in an argument the other day because basically the idea was, oh my goodness, no, I don't want you to do that. No, why do your phones always trying to force you into things? So question the other day, because they were divided as to whether or not bingo really going at it. Everybody's, and I just kind of kept my mouth shut and watched and ate some popcorn. I can't eat popcorn. I'm joking. But yeah, they were really going at it. And so then one of the other pastors, I don't know if he posted it to be funny or I don't know what, but he posted, he said, in light of the recent argument, I wanted to just share this paper that was sent out by the, I forget which section of the Texas district, but this was sent out a number of years ago now. It says, to the ministers and churches of the Texas District Fellowship, dear co-workers, at a recent meeting of the presbyters, the following resolution pertaining to worldliness was passed. Moved, seconded, and carried that this presbyter board in session recognizes the fact there is a wave of worldliness among our ministry and assemblies, and this presbyter board goes on record as disapproving such, and that we authorize our secretary send a letter, and we're asking that you read it out to the churches. And there's a bunch more. I'm not going to read you the whole thing, but it goes down to say this. These are the worldly things in question, okay? The presbyters unanimously agreed that worldliness such as movies, mixed bathing, which is public swimming, not taking a bath, public, yeah, right. Clarification: public pools, bowling alleys, wrestling matches, professional games, skating rinks, formal parties and banquets, and all other social gatherings which may result in more worldliness and ungodliness in our ministry and churches should be vigorous. They are, and it doesn't really matter. They just seem like they're bad. And so let's just say no to all of it because there could potentially be something bad there. Like movies, right? There could be an evil movie out there, so don't watch any of them. Meanwhile, the nonsense, and this is the really funny things, these same pastors who are so vehement about bingo and stuff, they're super into the Word of Faith movements and Bethel Church and all the nonsense that they put out. And I'm like, you don't see the irony there? But anyways, meanwhile, these nonsenses that actually were a big deal were getting into the church and became normalized. We stopped talking about it now, but for a number of weeks on our Sunday sermons, we were talking about prayer. And we talked about how using prayer kind of like a spell. You remember that? And how basically you've already received it, so you're just manifesting it. You're just, proclaiming that you already have it, which is, basically like witchcraft, just involving prayer. But for whatever reason, that was okay. But bingo, that's where we draw the line. I just thought it was funny. So let's just review what we looked at here. We looked at things that are not necessarily the occult getting into the church. We, once again, didn't want to close it with yes, it is, or no, it's not, but rather, how is your conscience leading you, and what's your opinion, what's your convictions, those kinds of things, because those are important. And so last week we were talking specifically about horror movies, and I think it went fantastic. There were some people who landed on pretty much I can watch any horror movie. Some people said I can't watch any horror movie, and some people were in the middle of I can watch some depending on the content. And, I thought it was a great discussion. And once again, the point is not whether or not I personally agreed with everything that was said. The point was whether or not you are growing in your faith and you're allowing the Holy Spirit to give you convictions of your own instead of living off the convictions of somebody that's dead and gone. I think sometimes it happens in the church. There'll be a pastor that we like or a Sunday school teacher that we liked when we were a kid, and they'll teach us something 50 years ago, and it was great, and so we've hung on to it, and we haven't really grown with ourselves. I mean, it was good when we were kids. It was fine. But then as you grew, did your convictions grow? Or were you just living off what they told you because, they said it, And I think that's a huge mistake. So I am going to re-record last Wednesday. I was supposed to do it, what's today? Wednesday. So I was supposed to do that Monday afternoon. How's that song go? I was going to clean my room, but then I got high. Things happened, okay? Things happened. I didn't get it recorded. I apologize for that. It will get done in time. It will get done. Let's see. I encourage you to watch it, to go back and watch it, and I will have in the description of that video the video that we tried unsuccessfully to watch here. I want to encourage you to watch that, but I will summarize here. They said basically there's 3 myths that Christians have about horror movies. They were, number 1, horror shows evil things, therefore Christians shouldn't watch it. Number 2, depictions of the occult are sinful. And number 3, the third myth, God says we should focus on what is good, lovely, and beautiful. And so he had some good things and some bad things. But definitely watch it, and so you can kind of brainstorm it for yourself. But as we lead into today, we're looking at continuing to kind of look at the occult as it's getting into the church and as it is in the Bible. And so let's are compromising on that either this church or any church, you believe that the church is compromising on this thing. Okay? It can be really anything that comes to mind, something that you think the church is compromising on. Okay, so something that a more like either a teaching that you feel like the church is compromising on, or a moral issue that maybe they're just kind of letting slide. They not really taking a stance on that they should be, or something that the church, you feel like the church isn't holding the standard on this anymore, whatever that thing is. Be it a sexual thing, or a spiritual thing, or a social thing, or whatever. Just something you feel like either this church or churches in general are compromising on. They're like not holding truth. Does that kind of make sense? Spencer. So you're saying compromising on the gifts of the Spirit being necessary. Okay. All right. Anything else? How could God, who made me, not be okay with how I'm acting? I'm not okay with how my kids are acting. Anybody else? So are you saying specifically the church? Okay, so let me clarify. Are you saying the pastor marrying them, or the pastor is getting married doing that? So basically, is the pastor the one doing the thing, or is he marrying the two who are doing the thing? Okay, so let me ask you a question. I've heard some people take this to kind of another extreme, and I want to see your take on this. If there's 2 people who are living together, are not married, they decide, you know what, we're living in sin, we want to get married. And they don't go to church, they're not really even Christian, but they think, hey, we're not doing the right thing, so they decide to get married. Now, are you opposed to the idea of the church hosting the people, whoever they are, getting married, and just the pastor not having anything to do with it? You guys aren't saying that, right? You're just saying, hey, we're not marrying you, right? Yeah, so I'm totally on the same page with you. Totally on the same page. And I would agree. This is my personal opinion. This is a pastor sharing his opinion, okay? Don't take it as gospel, my opinion. I would agree with what Grace is saying. Grace is saying, about how, not that I'm disagreeing with you. About having churches holding certain events that probably aren't real good ideas, Yeah, I would definitely agree there should be a little bit of... And I mean, obviously there's a distinction. Like, let's say, for instance, we held an event for all the leaders of Roswell to all meet together, and they were on all the businessmen and everything, and they were holding a meeting here. I don't really think that that's the same thing. But, when you got, a very visible, this is what we're about kind of situation, it's like, well, that really doesn't align with our values, but... I definitely hear what you're saying, So any other things that stick out that you think the churches are compromising on? Just don't want to belabor this, but if there's anybody else, speak now or forever hold your peace. Oh, you got something else? Yeah. And I mean, following up on that, Gracie, there's just a big push right now that, marriage really doesn't mean a whole lot right now in our culture. Sex is just kind of like a lot freer now than it used to be, so it's just kind of one of those things where, oh, it's okay that they're having sex. That's fine. Oh, you want to get married? Oh, things are getting serious now. It's like, oh, that's not how things used to be. You guys you kind of answered this. I was supposed to follow that up with, how are these things compromising? But you guys kind of already did that. What is the main mission of the church, do you feel like? Not this church. I'm not talking about the thing written on our wall. I mean, the main purpose of the church existing. Well, what's that? This isn't just like a one answer. This is like different things that you think the church exists for. in America and the world and everything. We said we had discipleship and fellowship. Okay, anything else you guys can think of right there? So then the next question would be, how do these areas of compromise prevent that? So the areas of compromise that we talked about. So Gracie mentioned something. Let me see. Melissa mentioned something, and somebody else did. Maybe that was it. Was that it? Okay, I guess that was it. How do those things you guys mentioned? This is that next question on that thing. How do these things prevent the church fulfilling its mission? Oh, you're ready. You're okay. Go ahead. Now, I appreciate you making that comment, Grace, about doing it in love, because so a lot of times we're told that it's this either-or dichotomy of either you're a feel-good church or you're this hateful, spiteful church. And I don't feel like it's that. Really, I don't. I feel like there is the church, right? And then I feel like over here, sometimes churches get a little bit too, you know what I mean? You know what I mean? Where you just don't really feel comfortable being there. They're so uptight. Or, you go way over here, and they're the exact opposites. But I find like the most of real Christians aren't really in the extremes. They're usually, they're doing it in love, but they are still holding to truth, So I appreciate that you mentioned that about in truth. Because, you hold to the line, you hold to the truth, but you do it with the right attitude. You say it nice. Like, you're wise with the way you say things. You don't just go out there, foot and mouth, But yeah, so actually, anything else? That you feel like these specific areas of compromise that we mentioned are preventing the church from its mission? Melissa and Gracie, if you guys have something. And building on that, what do you do if you're a hot mess? It isn't good. Right now my truth is suicide and loneliness and getting away from. My truth's not looking too hot. You know what I mean? They would be psych wards if there wasn't people with illnesses. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Follow my compass. Yeah. 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 There's a really good philosophical dilemma, and I'll give you the short version of it, but it's basically centered on that. How do you know what's right and wrong? Well, you follow your compass. Okay, what if your compass offends somebody? Well, I won't do something that offends somebody. Well, everybody's offended by something. So is that a realistic goal that you can achieve? Well, no, not really. So your moral compass is actually just self-defeating at that point, But anyways, Gracie, since you had an area of compromise, how do you feel like that is preventing the church from fulfilling its mission? Yeah, and actually that leads into the kind of the New Age thing too, because basically being the light of the world is basically something that is in me that I have awakened, and I'm living just the same, but I have my inner awakening that is revealed. So I'm a light in my essence and nature rather than I'm a light by my actions, Which leads us to another problem, which will get us off topic, but I still need to bring it up. What do you do with somebody who's severely bitter and hurt? They get into church. See what I mean? They need help, but at the same time, they infect the others. Kind of a little bit of a... But I've seen a lot of pastors do this, and, I'm not commenting one way or another. This is just me sharing. I've seen a lot of pastors who will see somebody that's bitter and get tired of dealing with them for good cause. They're going around causing a lot of problems. I understand. I'm not criticizing one way or another. And so then ask them to leave. So kind of gets one of the, well, do they really want to help? Or do they not want to help? Do they want to change, or do they not want to? Difficult topics, difficult subjects, but we'll move on. Okay, so we'll start off with the occult in the Bible. When I first realized that the Bible is full of occultic things, it kind of caught me a little bit off guard, because when you're a kid, they just tell you this: every word of the Bible is the word of God, the whole thing, and that's true. But they don't tell you how do you interpret it when Satan is talking and the Bible accurately records those words, but those words aren't true. What do you do then? What do you do when somebody in the Bible says something or does something and the Bible doesn't really comment on it? You just have to study the Bible to actually get what's going on. Where do you go with that? And so a lot of times there'll be things in the Bible that are occultic that I think we miss the importance of this, which we shouldn't because our culture is very occultic. So, starting in Exodus, which we could start in Genesis, but this is just a short version, okay? Starting in Exodus, the 10 plagues of Egypt. It says that God sends Moses to do these plagues for Egypt, which is God interacting in a supernatural phenomena. This is not a normal occurrence. And a lot of different people have tried to give natural explanations for these things, but you really can't. Because even if they did have a natural cause, it just so happened that they happened exactly when Moses did it. And it's just like, the odds of that are so slim and small. There was actually a book by Keller Wallace? I don't remember his name. Okay, just something like that. Keller something. I could look up the book if anybody cares. But and in this book, this is a journalist. He was a naturalist who was trying to prove the authenticity of the Bible. And so he did it, and he wrote this book called The Bible is History. But in the book, basically his argument was there are no supernatural occurrences. Here are physical or natural explanations to all of the occurrences of the Bible, which is obviously filled with holes. You can't do that. If you can't look at a supernatural event and say, here's all the natural explanation. This is the biggest problem with science and the creation of the Big Bang and all that. Because on one side, you've got people trying to just take the Bible as though it's a science textbook, and on the other side, you have people trying to just look at science as though we have anything to compare it to. How do you know what it looks like when a planet comes into creation? Have you seen that happen? Yeah, how can you possibly look at it and say, well, this is for sure how it happened? You don't know that. So this is kind of what's going on here. There's a supernatural occurrence happening. And this is where it really gets crazy because it says that after Moses does it, we're not going to read through all these different things, but I highly encourage you to go back and read it yourself. And afterwards, I can look up any scripture references you guys need. I just kind of wanted to give the shorter version. After Moses does these things, for the first almost half of the plagues, it says that there are basically, sorcerers. What was the word? Magicians. That Pharaoh has his own magicians, and it says that they did the same thing by their occultic practice, by the secret arts, the dark arts. Okay, so that's a whole can of worms that someday we should look at in detail. We can't do that today, but basically you have the idea of a magician repeating the phenomena. And what always sticks out to me, maybe this is off topic, but tell me guys what you guys think. So Moses brings down a bunch of gnats, and they're irritating everybody. So then the magicians go and do the same thing. Right? I mean, do you guys ever read this and you think, what? If you were so great, why didn't you get rid of the gnats? We didn't need any more. Thanks for your help, I guess. Anyways, yeah, these are not smart people, Todd. I don't know. And you know what the thing is? Pharaoh, when these knuckleheads do this, Pharaoh just acts like, haha, so there. What'd you prove? That there's more gnats now to bother you? Oh my gosh. Anyways, so but back to the topic here. So we see from the main idea we can get from Exodus is that there's a few things with the occult that I feel like are overlooked, especially in modern days. First off, it is real. Occultic power is real. Exodus shows us that. If the rest of the Bible doesn't say anything else about the occult, which it does, but if it didn't, we can still know the occult is real. Another thing that Exodus shows us is that it's powerful. The occult is powerful. When you go to palm readers and stuff, don't be so quick to say, oh, they're just a bunch of fakes and phonies. They might be. There are a lot of fakes and phonies, but there are people who practice by the occultic practices. I mean, these are not just things, you don't just sweep the whole thing out. All these people with the seances, there's about 50% of the people doing seances that it's just hogwash and baloney. But then there's another 50% that are really doing things there. So you need to be careful with this because it's not all fake. And so one thing that kind of happens fairly common is people just kind of throw it all out together. It's all fake. They're all just a bunch of fakes. You see this all the time on shows, especially shows from the 90s and the early 2000s. Oh, they're all just fake. Well, then we got into the later 2000s and the 2010s, and we got to, or is it? And all the shows had the same catch to it. There would be a physical explanation, but there'd also be a supernatural one. It's like, oh, okay. Monk had an episode that was like that, and I think Mentalist did. I seem to recall Psych having one like that. Anyways, it doesn't really matter. You get the point that I'm saying, that they all had these same kind of themes that were repeated over and over again about, are they all fake or are they not? And then in the recent stuff, they haven't even tried to, like, argue that it could possibly be fake. They're just like, yeah, Israel. And it's like, oh, okay. Well, that changed. But, obviously here, feelings don't decide truth. So then we go on in the story, and we can get to Judges. And we see a lot of things in Judges that is occultic, and the thing that scares me is how many things in Judges that are occultic that people latch onto and try to preach like it's a biblical thing to do. You remember the whole Gideon thing? Putting the Lord, his God, to the test, where the law says, do not put the Lord your God to the test. And so Gideon does that repeatedly over and over again, and the message we get from that is, put your wool out. What? Gideon didn't do the right thing. He was practicing occultic behavior. That's not something you copy. That's something that's not good. The law told us not to do that. Nowhere else in the whole Bible does it ever say that somebody did that in a good context. But Judges is what's called ambiguous, a gray book. It's not something like the law says don't do this, right? Judges doesn't really do that. Judges shows you a bunch of examples and lets you think about it. You know what I mean? It's kind of like Proverbs. Proverbs will say a whole bunch of things that are generally true. They might not be true in every single situation, but generally speaking, they're true. You know what I mean? So I'll give you a bunch of Proverbs for life generally. Now, you can't take every single one of those Proverbs and put them in any single context you can possibly imagine. That's just asking for a problem. And you can't hold to them like promises. Like, well, the Word of God says that if you punish your child or train the child in the way he should go, when he's older, he won't depart from it. Therefore, I'm going to teach my kid to be a Christian. He will be a Christian. Well, hold on. That's not what that verse means, first off. That's not what it means. Second off, it's not a promise. It's a proverb. Typically speaking, the way you teach your kids is how they'll act when they get older. Typically speaking. If you tend to be a very rash parent, chances are that's going to affect how your kids grow up to be adults. You see this over and over and over again. What's the saying? The apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Same basic concept. We're getting off topic, though, so let me hop it back in. With Judges, lots of different things about divination and Judges that are passed off like it's a good thing. It's not a good thing. Do all heroes wear capes? I think is the question of Judges. And no, we see gray characters in the book of Judges. All throughout the book of Judges, a bunch of gray characters. Samson. I don't want to get started on Samson. Gideon, I already mentioned. What's his name? I think it was Jephthah. Maybe it wasn't Jephthah. The guy that promises God that if he wins, he'll sacrifice the first thing he sees, and he comes home and sees his daughter. Things like this. This isn't like good, do this. Okay? When Jesus tells us something, that's something you should go and do. But Judges isn't one of those books you go to, you read it, and you go and do likewise, right? Like when Judas hangs himself, that doesn't mean you should go and do likewise, right? It's just... We understand that. There's different parts of the Bible you understand differently. So moving on, we can get to the books of Kings. Oh, wait, there's one more thing I wanted to say about this. So with the signs of confirmation, this is a form of divination where you're trying to discern the God or God's will through different signs or different things like that. In different cultures, they're a little bit different. Maybe in Norse culture, it'd be reading the bones. In different cultures, it's been reading the tea leaves, reading the palms. In Babylon, they were real big about reading reading the liver spots, and also if birds were flying on certain days or whatever, those would all be interpreted as a sign of what was to come. Anyways, moving past all that, it's all the same divination. You're trying to discern God's will through these signs and whatnot. And it's not the biblical model that we see at all. So when we get to the book of Kings and Samuel, and there's a lot of stuff that goes on there. And I'll just give you the short version because I don't want to keep us here all night. But I mean, I'll start with the most obvious one where King Saul goes to seance to contact the dead. Not great behavior. But once again, the Bible is filled with occultic activity and describing it. And then he really does contact the dead, which brings up a whole other argument, which we're not going to look at tonight. I just want to bring it up, and you guys read the Bible and kind of we'll come to those things later. But the Bible does not say that these things are not real. It says not to. There's a huge misunderstanding that people have that basically if it is shown that it's real, then it's real. You know what I mean? Which, keep in mind that this is exactly what's going to happen with the Antichrist in the book of Revelation. Remember? He says he's going to do signs and wonders, and people are going to say, oh, wow, you must be the real thing. So keep in mind that signs and wonders, that's not the sign of it being the real thing. You can see somebody do something, it can be powerful, it can be amazing. I went to the seance, they called it my dead relative, I talked, it was the same voice, they knew things that only that person knew, and see what I mean? And it doesn't matter if it's real or not. That was never the issue. The Bible doesn't give us a thesis statement for the occult being real. It says this, don't do it. End of conversation. Sometimes, you tell your kids why you shouldn't do things. Sometimes you just tell them don't. You know what I mean? Hey, don't touch that stove. Why? You know what? Never mind. Touch the stove. See what happens. And it's just one of those things where God's not going to sit you down every single time and give you this explanation for every single thing that he says. He's not going to do that. And if you get really, really mad and you pray and scream and holler at God, he still won't do it. It's not like God is like this little genie in the bottle where every single time there's something he has we don't like, let's just nag him and yell at him and get angry with him and then he'll finally tell me what I want. That's not how it works. That's not how it works. So, no. The issue in the Bible is never whether or not it's real or not. The issue in the Bible is do not do it. And it's not always clear why. So we go to the rest of the books of Kings, 1st and 2nd Kings, and into Chronicles and whatnot. But again, getting off topic, there is a lot of occultic things going on. First off, cultic prostitution. This is the practice whereby you go to different prostitutes at the different shrines, and this blesses you with fertility. So if you're trying to get your wife pregnant and she won't get pregnant, go to the cultic prostitute. Maybe something will happen there. If your land isn't quite growing like it should, go to the cultic prostitute. Because sex was kind of a expression of the way that the gods worked. For instance, I've shared with you guys, I think I have, about in Egyptian theology, there was this idea that how life got started was one of the gods, and I'll kind of move this on kind of quickly, had his time on the ground, and that was what caused everything to grow. So sex in the occult is a very normative thing, and it's not something that you shouldn't be shy about. It's something that's shown. So cultic prostitution, that's not gross. This is how we do things, which is a conversation for another day. When we talk about Wicca, we'll talk about sex again when we talk about Wicca. We'll just skip it for now. But cultic prostitution, you see that in there. Another one you see, human sacrifice. These were done for lots of different reasons. One of the reasons was basically if you... I'm just going to give you the short version here. You kill one child, the other children get to live. Short version. There's other reasons for doing it too, the wrath of the gods and different things, but we'll skip all that and just say, human sacrifices. Another thing, idol worship, all throughout there, which now we don't have idols, we just have, well, I'm not going to say my little snide comment. I'll just say this, idols are very much so alive and well. They just don't look the same as they used to. So, and I'll just move on from there. Reading the stars, you see that in the books of Kings. Magical incantations. These are a bunch of different things you see. So then we get down to the Gospels, and you really have a little bit of a hard time because you have a lot of occultic activity happening there with demonic possession. Huge theme in the Gospels. And then there's a few occultic things specifically that seem very odd, and I will say them all together. The first of them is there's a part in one of the Gospels, I believe it's the Gospel of John, where after Jesus' resurrection, he's walking with some of the people on the road to Emmaus or something, and when he's going there, they don't recognize him. So in the occult, this is a big theme. We'll look at some other time, but the idea of taking on different forms, skin changing, different things like that, they're all kind of related. But, there's the idea of taking on, different forms and whatnot. And so you're left with did Jesus do this thing or not? Is that something, so that, once again, conversation for another day. I'm just bringing up the occultic things. The second one that I want to mention is in the book of Acts, and that's where, oh goodness, what is his name? He's not one of the main characters. Like there's Peter and Paul that are like the two big wigs in Acts, right? But then there's this one guy, he goes and preaches at the guy in the chariot. You guys remember this? Baptizes the guy on the side of the road. You guys remember this? What? No. Was that him? Was that it? Yeah. Was that Philip? Okay, so let's call him Philip. And if he's not, it was Todd who said it. Not it. I'm just kidding. But okay, so Philip, he is on witnessing to this guy, and it says that the Spirit took him up and moved him elsewhere. This is, if you know anything about occultic practices, this is very much so something that the occult talks about a lot. Transporting, levitation, these kinds of things are all kind of interconnected in occultic thoughts. But anyways, and this is something you see with Philip, and you're like, okay, is he doing something from occult? Once again, we'll look at this some other day. I'm just bringing up to your attention. And then obviously levitation, we see that with Jesus when he's going up into heaven. So these are all things that we will look at some other time. I'm just simply bringing out the things, okay? So don't forget that we talked about these things, but don't rush to a conclusion of what I'm saying. I'm not condemning Jesus or Philip or anybody else, okay? Don't walk out of here with the wrong idea, okay? So, so then getting more specific to occult phrases, which is something that Melissa brought up. That I didn't think you were going to go there, so I'm very glad that you did, because, now we can. I even made myself a little note because I forget things. If I tell people this all the time. I don't have a great memory. I'm great at writing things down. So, occult things in church. Got it. I won't forget. I want to read you. This is by Alyssa Childers. If you don't know who Alyssa Childers is, there was a girl pop band in early 2000s. They were called Zoe Girl. Yes, that's what they were called. And Alyssa Childers was one of the singers on Zoe Girl. Well, she grew up, I said as a joke, she grew up to be a apologist, defending the Christian faith. You can find her on YouTube. She's got some books. Obviously, I've got one right here. But anyways, she said she has some very interesting things to say in this book called Live Your Truth and Other Lies, Exposing Popular Deceptions That Make Us Anxious, Exhausted, and Self-Obsessed. And so I want to read to you for just a little bit here some of the things that she says here. With words constantly evolving in definition and meaning, these types of mix-ups can happen even among people who grew up on the same street. For example, take the word tolerance. Years ago, tolerance meant that even though you might disagree with someone else's opinion, you respected their right to say it and wouldn't retaliate with violence or abuse. That's what tolerance used to mean. Okay? Well, in our culture, tolerance often means celebrating and affirming the opinions of someone else and never implying that they could be objectively wrong about anything, especially when it comes to morality or religion. In fact, if you're a fan of books, you'll find a common theme nowadays where it's very common to make fun of Christians, and that's totally fine, but you can't make fun of these people who have these other views. Now, I wouldn't recommend making fun of them anyways because we're Christians. That's not what we should be about. However, under the principle of the thing, it should go both ways. Whatever. You can't tolerate a person unless you disagree with them. I'm sorry, I skipped too much there. But this modern usage of tolerance is not just a redefinition. It is the exact opposite of what the word actually means. Remember, we were talking about the way that the occult and the cults, they switch words, but they use the same words. It's just the meaning that changes. You can't tolerate a person unless you disagree with them. This updated definition robs people of having actual opinions, at least ones they are permitted to say out loud. So then we get to just a few more things here. I don't want to read the whole book, even though I would recommend you go get the book. Okay? In the world, it calls itself tolerance, but in hell it is called despair. The sin that believes in nothing, cares for nothing, seeks to know nothing, interferes with nothing, enjoys nothing, loves nothing, hates nothing, finds purpose in nothing, lives for nothing, and remains alive only because there's nothing it would die for. Scathing words there. But tolerance isn't the only one word getting a modern-day makeover. Words like love, hate, bigot, male, female, oppression, justice, and truth. Then she goes on to say, in Mama Bear Apologetics, Hillary Morgan Ferrer refers to this phenomenon as linguistic theft, which she defines as purposefully hijacking words, changing their definitions, and then using those same words as tools of propaganda. And in this way, we actually end up agreeing with people that we are clearly disagreeing with. And because they say things so fast, you're like, wait, but hold on. And they're already in control of the conversation. You're like, I didn't agree to this. But anyways, so then it goes on to say 5 different things. Identifies 5 ways that linguistic theft, what we're talking about here, undermines real communication. Number 1, it can stop a conversation in its tracks for obvious reasons. You can't really have a conversation because you can't really talk. Number 2, it can cause people to act before thinking an issue all the way through. Because there's no conversation, they're just kind of rushing to the conclusion. Number 3, it obscures the specifics. So if it sounds like a good cause, then hey, it's fine. Like I mentioned a couple weeks ago about that YouTuber that got canceled and then uncanceled in the same week because of a false claim. Number 4, it assumes the worst of opponents. Ooh, boy, think Twitter in 2020. Everyone who you disagreed with was Hitler. You know, and it's so funny being a pastor. I got to share this because this is funny to me. You might not find this funny. I find it hilarious. I'll go and visit somebody, and we'll be talking, and they'll say, isn't it so terrible what's going on? And I'm thinking about how this person's in the hospital, this person's sick, this person, is wavering in their faith, this person's, and that's what I'm thinking about. So I'm like, no, I hadn't heard. Tell me, what's wrong? What's wrong? That Trump, him and his people are just ruining everything. I'm like, oh, thank God. I thought it was something important. Oh, thank God, right? And then I'll go to another person and they'll say, isn't it wonderful? And I'll say, what? What's wonderful? What happened? What did I miss? Trump, he's fixing everything. And I'm just like, okay, all right. I literally hear the exact same thing from Trump supporters that I hear from anti-Trump people. The exact same arguments are exactly what they say. And so I get to hear them say the same thing. The names have been substituted to protect the guilty or the innocent. They'll say Biden or the other person will say Trump or so on and so forth. And I'm just like, I didn't really come here to talk about the president. I just want to see how you were doing, and I wanted to pray for you. Like, that's all I wanted to do. Oh, my goodness. Anyways, number 5, it presents a negative as a positive or a positive as a negative. And I don't really even have to elaborate on that one. So some powerful things there in that book. And I just kind of want to build up on it with a few things, comments that I'm going to make. They're from Psalms, 50s, 40s or 50s. You're going to regret at least one thing that you did. And it's going to stick in your mind. It's going to keep you up at night. And your kids oftentimes are going to throw that one thing in your face. Don't believe me. Have kids for yourself and wait to find out. And then you're in for the real disaster. Spencer, I'm telling you this now, okay? Don't throw anything too harsh in your mom's face, buddy, okay? It will come back on you eventually. I speak from experience on this one there, buddy. You don't know what you're doing when you open up your mouth. It's always better and safer to keep it closed. But anyways, so now, basically, you can have a perfect child if you are the perfect parent. And if you remember, we heard something like this about 20 years ago. Do you guys remember this? When they said, knowledge will basically fix the world. If we can educate people, people will become better people. Remember they said this? What? Yeah, the more you know. They even had this whole thing, and Oprah was on it, and Whoopi Goldberg was on it. We're going to go to Africa. We're going to educate all these ignorant Africans, and then the world's going to be a better place because we've corrected the problem. The ignorant barbarians have been saved by our knowledge. Okay, well now, in the meantime, 20, 30 years later, here we are, and I don't think the world's any safer or saved more than it was before, It really didn't change anything. It didn't perfect us. Life itself is traumatizing. This is something I've learned. Okay, you have the best parents, best home life, everything's the best. As soon as you move out of that house, if not sooner, life's going to come by and smack you so hard upside the back of your face, that it will traumatize you anyways. You're going to get sick with something, somebody else is going to die, something's going to happen, you're going to get traumatized. Okay? I had a counselor, I don't have this counselor anymore, but I used to have this counselor, and I was like, now, why do you think I'm dealing with that? And he says, people always want me to tell them why they're going through these things. Don't waste your time. And I said, what do you mean by that? He said, people always want to know why they're doing something, but it doesn't change anything. It does not change how you will live your life. This is what you need to know. This is your problem. These are things we can do to fix it. So you can sit back and try to figure out whose fault it is, or you can fix it. And I said, well, let's do that. Let's do the fixing it thing. Because and I even joked about it afterwards. My mom said, how'd the counseling go? And I said, oh, they said it's all Dad's fault. And she said, really? And I said, no, Mom, no. It's your fault. Yeah, I should have said that. That's good. Oh, man, both barrels loaded on this one. She's a firecracker. So as the more things that you hear that are cultic, that are very much so in the church, you hear them everywhere. Melissa already brought up some of them. I am enough. Well, if you're enough, then you don't really need God, do you? You deserve good things. And here's the thing. A lot of these occultic things have a measure of truth. Is it true that you deserve good things? In a sense, in a sense, if you have been abused and raped as a child, you did not deserve those things to happen to you. You did not deserve them. And so what happens is you grow older and you start thinking this, I did something wrong. This happened because I did something wrong. I should have just done this, or this should have happened, or this should... Not your fault. Not your fault. In fact, that's the thing about this. So in that sense, yes, you do not deserve the bad things that came to you. Absolutely. That's absolutely true. But when we're talking about this, we're talking about more in the sense of you deserve good things like, hey, God owes you one. And so in that context, and that's what I'm saying, a lot of these occultic things are true in a certain light. It's true in a certain sense. Let's keep moving. There's a song that I despise. It's on the radio. It's on the Christian radio. It goes like this: I am made in the image of a perfect king. He looks at me and wouldn't change a thing. I'm sure you guys have heard the song if you listen to popular Christian radio. I'm not even going to get to all this, but you can obviously see the problem is we weren't made in the image of a king. We were made in the image of a God. This is the difference. This is the difference. King is a position. God is his character. See the difference? So when it says we're made in his image, it's talking about his character. There's certain things about his character that we share. These are called knowable things. He has unknowable things that we do not share, but then he has knowable things that we do share. This is a theology lesson we'll talk about some other time. But we do share those things. However, nowhere in the Bible does it ever say that we share his kingness. Okay? Now, that takes us to a whole another conversation about kings and queens and all that stuff. We're going to talk about that another time. Don't get off track. Just remember that. Stick it in your back pocket. And we'll look at it for a rainy day. He looks at me, wouldn't change a thing. It depends. If we're talking about your physical, yes. If we're talking about your spiritual, no. So he made you to look as you look, and he's totally happy with how you look, right? You don't have to dye your hair to be cool with God, right? However, we are sinners, and God's not cool with that, right? Just like you're not okay with somebody, doing drugs in the church, I don't think that it's wrong for God to tell his creation what they ought to change, So anyways, moving on. Watch out for you. Look out for number one. We hear this all the time. And there's an element of truth to it. Like, for instance, if you keep on pouring out and trying to take care of everybody else around you, you're going to wear yourself down. That's true. That's true. You do need time to decompress. Oh, absolutely. I'm not arguing with you there. No, not arguing. However, if your goal is there's been so many people who've hurt me in my life, I have to look out for number one, basically what you're doing is you're allowing your past trauma to guide your entire future. See what I mean? So you're never letting go of it because it's always the thing you got to do. You're watching out for number one. You are the first thing in your life instead of God. If they are harming your mental health, cut them out. This can be true, but here's the thing. Everyone harms your mental health at certain times. Have you ever been hurt mental health-wise by your spouse? Don't raise your hands. Don't raise your hands. I didn't think about it when I lifted my hand, okay? Don't raise your hands. But yes, we have all who have been married, yes, it does hurt our mental health sometimes. You have arguments and fights, absolutely. That doesn't mean you should kill them or beat them or, divorce them or all these different things. Okay, calm down. But yeah, so we can see obviously there the element of forgiveness is just thrown out the door. Just thrown out the door. There's a lot of Christian books, really so many different Christian books that we could look at. I'm just going to settle for some things that she mentions in this book. Some of these are from Rachel Hollis. She was a popular Christian author a couple years ago. I don't know if she's still popular because one of her books was massively plagiarized and there was a whole big thing. But anyways, let's see. You are meant to be the hero of your own story. I am willing to be the villain in someone else's story if it means I can be the hero of my own. Yeah, that's an interesting thought. We do not need more selfless women. What we need right now is more women who have detoxed themselves so completely from the world's expectations that they are full of nothing but themselves. What we need are women who are full of themselves. And this author is full of herself, I tell you what. A woman who is full of herself knows and trusts herself enough to say and do what must be done. She lets the rest burn. You should be the very first of your priorities. Or this one here. I'll abandon everyone else's expectations of me before I'll abandon myself. I'll disappoint everyone else before I'll disappoint myself. I'll forsake all others before I'll forsake myself. I sure hope she doesn't have kids. Oh my goodness. Me and myself, we are till death do us part. Well, I guarantee you her marriage is not going to, if she's married, it's not going to last because there's no room for a guy in there. She's got too much of herself. You know what I mean? So these are just simple observations. I'm not even commenting on those. Okay. I hope that you were able to just kind of think about it for yourself. These are all Christian books. Those quotes all came from Christian books. Okay. Be careful when you have the Bible as a secondary reading and Christian books as your primary, because Christian books nowadays, they're sketchy, guys. They are super sketchy. YOLO, we looked at that one before, though. Usually YOLO is used for excuse for stupidity. Well, I want to do something, and not always, and now it's not even used by kids anymore, but still. Here's another one here. That's a good thing of having books that cited other people, because you can just read their citations, and you get a whole lot more. So even though I'm reading from one author, these are taken from different people. There was a study done, interviewing more than 3,000 teens. They identified 5 beliefs the typical teen had in common with each other. These are things that nowadays teenagers share these beliefs with one each other, okay? Number 1, a God exists who created and orders the world and watches over human life on earth. Sounds good. We're off to a good start. Number 2, God wants people to be good, nice, and fair to each other, as taught in the Bible and most world religions. So it starts to get a little bit off track. Number 3, the central goal of life is to be happy and to feel good about oneself. Ooh. In fact, nowadays, the youth of today see witnessing as an evil thing. So this is another hurdle to hop over in our evangelism efforts. Number 4, God does not need to be particularly involved in one's life except when God is needed to resolve a problem. Think in terms of a get-out-of-jail card or monopoly. Number 5, good people go to heaven when they die. See, there's a basic idea there about heaven and hell, the basic idea about good and bad, but it just fails to really have any depth to it. And these are things that today's youth share these beliefs. God wants you to be happy. What is happy? What does that mean? Depending on your definition, that could be true. You are good. What is good? In what definition? There's a sense that we are good, like Jesus talks about this. If you are good, your fruit will be good, right? But then there's a sense that we're definitely not good, like in the sense of God's goodness, right? So there's different, you got to really, what are you saying and what do you mean by those things? All faiths are equal. You hear this all the time. If it's powerful, it's God. We're all going to heaven. Not everyone who goes to church is going to heaven, though, which I feel like all of us know that. And not everybody who doesn't go to church isn't going to heaven, which I feel like sometimes we don't know that one as well. We stopped having discussions and allowing questions. Like, for instance, in the 90s, how many times did you hear pastors in the 90s talk about sex? Nope, never once. Never once. So now the world believes crazy things about sex, and last week we were talking about the way that should we have an opinion and a voice in different arenas? Well, I don't know if we should have an opinion and a voice in different arenas like horror movies and those. I don't know. But I do know that we can clearly see what happens when you don't. Sex is out of control nowadays. There's no moral sense of sex anymore. It's not a moral thing anymore. It's just hey, let's feel good for an evening, and who cares what happens afterwards? So basically, when people break up nowadays, it's like they're getting little divorces, and the reason why is because they've been having sex the whole time. So they've been uniting their souls together again and again and again throughout the course of their dating experience, living together like married people, and then when they break up, it's like they're having little divorces. And every single time that they break up with someone, they're having another divorce. So you have people who have never been married that have had 7 or 8 divorces. This is a big burden that we were never meant to carry. Let's keep going. We're almost done. So we stopped talking about sex in the church. Lo and behold, wouldn't you know it, there's a bunch of sexual immorality rampant in the church. Wouldn't you know it? No questions about the Bible. You couldn't ask questions about the Bible. You couldn't have doubts about your faith. So what happened to those people? They left the church. They left the church because they didn't feel like there was a good answer, so they just left. Don't question anything, just believe. We don't believe just because there's good reason for our belief, right? Like, we're not like the Mormons who said, there was this magic scroll that was given to us by an angel, but it was in this language that doesn't even really exist, and the angel told the prophet how to, and then it just disappeared. Okay, that's wild. Like, that's just wild. There's actual reason for why we believe the things that we believe. You know what I mean? It's not crazy. No dissension whatsoever, no of this, none of this, and so on down the list. At the same time, though, you had people saying, well, my way isn't being ratified at this church, therefore I'll just go somewhere else, or I'll just not go at all. So basically, if this church isn't going to do things my way, I'll just leave. So there's kind of like, obviously the two polar opposites. But let's summarize some things, because obviously this was a very lengthy thing, and I already started too late. I wish I could blame it on you guys having too long of discussion, but you didn't. So it's all me, guys. The summary then, the occult is of last... What in the world? I didn't do it. The occult is very subtle. That was the summary for last week. I'm sorry, I didn't have it on here. I'm sorry. The summary for this week, the occult in the church is much more... Oh, no, that is the right one. Is much more subtle than it seems. When we think of the occult in the church, we oftentimes think about these things that we feel conviction about or have an opinion about, which is fine. Those things may or may not be occultic. That's fine. However, we overlook these big issues because we're so focused on this. Like, here's a good example. Christians can't be New Age. I think we're all on the same page with that one, right? So we were so focused on that we kind of let this other stuff, which is actually called New Thought, the stuff that you were talking about, we let New Thought in because we were only watching out for New Age. And so next week about next week. Next week may be canceled, depending on whether or not we have the date night. I don't know if we've had anybody sign up for that yet. If we end up not having people sign up for it, we'll cancel it, and we'll still have Wednesday night next week, okay? But like I say, I don't like to overtax people. I don't like to ask people to come to a bunch of different stuff and just overburden people. I think a lot of times pastors do that. So when we have an event, I like to cancel the service so that way you don't have to pick and choose. Okay, you don't get too busy. With that being said, if we are still doing it, then next week will be canceled. If we aren't doing it, if you sign up, I will let you know if the event gets canceled from lack of people coming to it. But so if it is still going on next week, we're actually watching a video by Melissa Doherty or something like that, and she's going to talk about more about the new thought that you brought up and that I brought up in this book here. And then I've lumped it all together as New Age in the church. But and then from there we'll be able to go on to some more specific things. Because up to this point we've just been talking about general things. You know what I mean? The cults generally speaking. Well, now we'll be able to actually look at some actual things and delve into it, and start giving some answers about some stuff. And so, anyways, any questions before we close this out, or comments? Questions or comments? Is it about this? Why do I talk about sex? Because it's a natural part of life. And if we don't talk about sex, we won't know what God says about sex, right? Sex is a good thing that God has given to us, but it's being misused by a lot of people. So we have to make sure that we know what the truth is so that we can talk with people who don't think it's the wrong. Make sense? Okay. You can't just avoid a conversation because you don't want to. You know what I mean? One good example of that is I really didn't want to have a conversation with my son about transgenders, but it's a part of our world now, so I kind of had to. You know what I mean? I can't ignore it. It's there. So, okay. Any other questions? I hope that answered everybody's questions and everything. If you want to get a head start on the different cults in the occult, the best place to start is really stay in the Word, guys. Stay in the Word. If you're reading it a little bit, read it a little bit more. Really get in there, and that's going to be the best resource to have when we're talking about the cults and the occult. So